Namaste, good evening and welcome. It is my great pleasure, honor and privilege to be standing here before you on this August platform to talk to you about what is one of my favorite subjects, timeless wisdoms from ancient India. Now, this event would not have been possible if not for the concerted and tireless efforts of a number of people and institutions. So I think it's only apposite that I acknowledge them first before proceeding any further. So many, many thanks are due to Sri Randhir Jaiswal, the Consul General of India in New York, and his team at the Indian Consulate. Thank you, sir, for making this happen. Many thanks are due to Neelam Chaudhary and her team at the Asia Society. Thank you, Neelam. And many, many thanks are due to my friend and my woman in New York, Anu Sehgal of the Culture Tree, who has always believed in me and has wanted to make this happen for so long. And finally, I'm here. So thank you all very much. And thank you all very much for showing up to listen to me speak. I mean, when Neelam said that this was happening on a weekday evening at between 6 and 7 p.m. at what is one of the most vibrant and exciting and, well, hardworking cities in the world, I really did not expect this big of a turnout at all. But all of you have not only made the effort to leave your workplaces early so that you can be here, you also have foregone, at least between 6 and 7 p.m., all the excitement and fun that New York has to offer to be here. And that, to me, is ample testimony, if testimony were ever needed, of the continuing and timeless power and charm and magic and the seduction of the ancient Indian texts. So I stand before you today to speak about them not as an academic, not as a scholar. I don't even speak Sanskrit very well. I'm not a monk or a nun. I am not a lifelong practitioner of the ancient texts or of the philosophies. I haven't been steeped in them since I was a child. None of that. I came to them rather late in life myself. Only about 9 years ago when I started researching for the Gita for children, and that too very reluctantly. I was determined to prove to my editor, who wanted me to write a version of the Gita for children, that the Gita was not meant for children at all. That's how much I knew about it. I had not engaged with it in any kind of depth. I was intimidated by it because anyone I knew who talked about the Gita knowledgeably seemed to have, gone for Gita classes for years. And everyone who spoke about it said, we have only just peeled the first layer. And I said, listen, this is me who has not engaged with the Gita at all. And you want to saddle me with the responsibility of interpreting it for a young and impressionable audience? Certainly I'm the wrong person. So it was really my fear that was keeping me from doing this. And unlike Greek mythology made famous in the recent past by American authors like Rick Riordan, who writes the Percy Jackson series, Rick Riordan can do whatever he wants. He can take the Greek gods from Mount Olympus and put them on top of Empire State Building, and nobody's going to bat an eyelid. Everyone is going to enjoy it because obviously nobody worships the Greek gods anymore. But in India, for the last, I don't know how many thousands of years, because it's very difficult to date these texts. They were always orally transmitted. There's no material evidence of when they were first compiled. Sanskrit is a language of sound, not of writing. And although we have now started writing Sanskrit using the Devanagari script, it didn't have a script of its own. It was never meant to be written down. It's a language of sounds that was meant to be heard. So these texts are very difficult to date. But for thousands of years, they have remained on India's and the world's bestseller lists and continue to be vibrantly alive in the land of their birth. So one cannot be too irreverent about them. There is a limit to the kinds of liberties you can take when you're interpreting the Gita. And therefore, I was in a fever of incomprehension and fear, and I said, I don't want to do it, although I put it across as, oh, I'm sure it's not for children. I'm sure it's for people over 65. All these excuses I was trotting out. And my editor said, this is unlike you. Why don't you give it a chance? You shouldn't be saying that you don't want to do it without even knowing what it's about. And that I thought was fair. So I said, okay, I'm going to take a month, engage with it. But if it's going to be patriarchal, if it is in the least bit casteist, if it is sexist, if this, that, the other, I'm not going to whitewash it for children. I'm going to, say it, or I'm going to not do it at all. Plus, there was the other thing. You see, I had just finished writing what became India's first fantasy adventure series for children. So I was being regarded as the school author. And cool children's authors do not write about scripture. That was the other thing. So all these things were keeping me away from it. But when I honestly and sincerely engaged with it for just 1 month, and I don't even speak Sanskrit, I was looking at various commentaries and things, I was so charmed. Within 15 days, within a month, I had turned around entirely, 180 degrees. And in fact, I was telling my mom and everybody else, why did you not have a copy of the Gita in the house? Why was I not exposed to this great text? And I had made it my mission within 30 days that this great text should go out to people in any which way. Now, as Mr. Randhir Jaiswal said, I'm going to be talking, when I refer to the ancient Indian texts today, we know there is such a large volume of ancient Indian texts. Some of it is native, some of it is lost. Much of it is still inaccessible in the sense that it hasn't been translated. It's lying in archives. There is so much, and there is spiritual literature, there is secular literature, there is scientific literature, there's a whole wealth of literature. And there's never going to be a time when one person is going to be able to access or talk about all of it. And therefore, for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to only refer to 3 texts or 3 bodies of work that I have some familiarity with, given that I have written books for children in those, and they are the Vedas, Upanishads, and the Bhagavad-Gita. Now, while most of you here perhaps are familiar with these terms, the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Bhagavad-Gita, I suspect many of us do not know how they relate to each other and where they are situated in India's chronological and geographic history. So I'd like to take just a few moments to locate them, to situate them before we proceed. And if you already know this, please indulge me, because I think there may be people who don't know. It was the way of the ancient rishis of India to, when they were trying to explain an idea that was new or unfamiliar, they would start with an idea that was already familiar and proceed from there. And if we had to use the same technique today, between the Vedas, Upanishads, and the Gita, it's clear that the Bhagavad-Gita is the most popular, most beloved text, best known. So we will start from there and then go back. So the Bhagavad-Gita, most of you know, is a conversation. It's a conversation between 2 best friends, the Pandava prince Arjuna, the greatest warrior, the greatest archer of his day, and his best friend and mentor, Krishna. This conversation happens in a battlefield just moments before a great battle that was going to divide and destroy Bharat for a while was about to happen. Bharat is, of course, India's word for India. And this particular episode of this conversation, 700 verses of it, is part of a sprawling epic, the great Indian epic called the Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata, as we said, Bharata, it was just the Indian name for India, and the Mahabharata can simply be translated as the great Indian story. It has every element of drama in it. It is said that there is not a single human emotion that has been unexplored in the Gita, in the Mahabharata, and it continues to be a compelling story that engages people 2,500 years at least after it was first composed. And I said the Mahabharata is a sprawling text with many, many characters. How many shlokas do you think it has? A shloka is a couplet or a verse. How many shlokas in the Mahabharata? Anyone? More than 10,000. Way more than 10,000. 30,000? Getting warm. Yeah, actually there are 100,000 shlokas in the Mahabharata. And remember, these were meant to be learnt by heart, by rote. There was no Google to go back and refer and see what does it actually say. And you had to listen to it. It wasn't even written down. So when I talk to children, I always joke, aren't you glad you were born in the 21st century? Otherwise, this would be good holiday homework. Learn all the 100,000 verses of the Mahabharata. Thankfully, that didn't happen. 100,000 verses, which, when compared to the other great epic of India, which is the Ramayana, the Mahabharata is more than 4 times the length of the Ramayana. What about the great epics that are the cornerstone foundational texts of Western literature, the Greek epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey? The Iliad and the Odyssey put together are less than half the size of the Ramayana. And the Mahabharata is 100,000 verses long, which makes it the longest epic story and perhaps the oldest of that size that we know in the world. And in the middle of the Mahabharata is embedded this tiny conversation called the Bhagavad-Gita. It is only 700 verses. I mean, only 700 verses, only relatively speaking, but 700 verses out of 100,000, which makes it less than 1% of the size of the Mahabharata. And yet, it is this 0.7% of the Mahabharata that has captivated people of all ages and all countries, whatever culture they come from, whatever gods they worship. It has captivated people from the beginning of time. But where does the philosophical content of the Bhagavad-Gita come from? That many of us may not know, but Vedavyasa, the author of the Mahabharata, who also composed the Bhagavad-Gita, he distilled the wisdoms of the Upanishads, which were sprawling texts again and very abstruse, abstract, not easy for common people to understand, and he was determined that these wisdoms would be passed on to future generations. So he distilled all those wisdoms into the compact form that we know as the Bhagavad-Gita. So that is the relationship of the Bhagavad-Gita to the Upanishads, which were way older texts. They were written first, and then Vedavyasa distilled all their wisdoms into the Bhagavad-Gita. Where do the Vedas come into it? The Upanishads are part of the Vedas, which are even older texts. And the Vedas, as far as we know, are the oldest extant Indian texts. And the Veda, what does it mean? It means knowledge, because the root word of Veda is vid, which is also the root sound of Vidya. So it basically means knowledge. And I was discussing with one of my friends just before the event started, what kind of knowledge? When the Veda says knowledge, what does it mean? What knowledge? And that knowledge is not book knowledge. It's not knowing the capitals of all the countries of the world. It is not rocket science. It is not quantum mechanics. What the ancient texts mean by Veda is the knowledge that is timeless, eternal, and unchanging. And what that knowledge is the knowledge that all of us, each one of us, is neither our bodies, nor our minds, nor our emotions. We are, in fact, our invincible, indestructible spirits that exist inside each of us. So that is the Veda. And all the ancient Indian texts basically guide us. The purpose of all of them is to guide us towards what is called darshana, seeing, the ability to see that all external differences among people and animals and trees and birds and insects and mountains and rivers, they all look like very, very different forms. But darshana is being able to see that all those externalities are only the illusion, that on the inside, we all carry the same divine spark of creation, and in that sense, we are all the same. So these are the stated goals of the ancient Indian texts. Now, where and when were they composed? So the Vedas, the oldest extant texts, at least 3,500 years ago, and I'm not going to say this with any kind of this is written in stone, because, as I said, very difficult to date. But the Vedas, the oldest one, the Rig Veda, was around at least 3,500 years ago. Who composed them? The people, the brightest minds of a civilization called the Vedic civilization, for want of a better word, because they composed the Vedas, so we call them the Vedic civilization. Where did they base themselves? Like all other ancient civilizations, they based themselves on the banks of a river. Which river was this? The mighty river Indus, which actually is a Greek term, Greek word for Indus, Greek name for the river. The Vedic people called it the Sindhu. So on the banks of the Sindhu and banks of another river called the Saraswati, this great civilization rose, and from there, they were the people who composed and gave us the gift of the Vedas. The two rivers, of the two rivers, only the Sindhu exists anymore. The Saraswati is gone, but these two were part of a river system of 7 rivers, in fact. The Indus being the main river, its tributaries being the Ravi, the Chenab, the Jhelum, the Sutlej, and Beas. So these were the 7 rivers, and the ancient Indians, the Vedic people, they called the whole river system the Sapta Sindhu. the 7 rivers. This was the kind of natural northwest boundary of the geography of the land that was called Bharat. And to the west of that were the Persians. Now, the Persians, in their language, substituted the sound sa in Sanskrit with the word ha, with the sound ha. And therefore, to the Persians, the Sapta Sindhu was in fact the Hapta Hindu. And the people who lived beyond the Hindu, they called the Hindus. The land that existed beyond the Hindu river was to them Hindustan. And that is the origin of the word Hindu. It never referred to a religion. It referred only to the people who inhabited a certain geography. And it is for this reason that the word Hindu is not to be found in any of our ancient texts. Neither is the word Hinduism, because that is only about 200 years old. That terminology, did you know that? It's only about 200 years old. There was no word called Hinduism. So why do our ancient texts not have the word Hindu in them? For a very simple reason. The ancient texts were written in a language called Vedic Sanskrit, from which the Sanskrit that we speak today, classical Sanskrit, is derived. And the word Hindu is a Persian word. So obviously it wouldn't find a place in a Sanskrit text. And so what did the people of the Vedic age, what did they refer to themselves as? They called themselves the Arya. And what did they call their philosophy as? They called it not Hinduism, not Hindutva, they called it Sanatana Dharma. And what does that mean? The eternal law. Something that is universal beyond the bonds of race, creed, caste, color, geography, truths that apply to all humanity forever. And they seem to have a good thing going because they still apply. To this day, we are looking to them for guidance and solace. Because while the world around us has changed unrecognizably since the world of the Vedic people, the world inside us has not changed at all. This is the problem, and this is the wonderful thing about it, that the world outside may change as you can bring in technology, everything is improved, you're living much more comfortable lives, we're living longer lives, medicine has improved to such an extent that we are now dreaming of living forever, freezing our brains, all kinds of things. But has the inner world of human beings changed at all? We are still beset with the same questions, obsessed with the same anxieties, the same fears, and nothing has changed in that world. And that is why these texts, because they appeal to that world, because they address that world, continue to be relevant. So what are the questions that these texts purport to answer? What are those existential questions that have troubled humanity since time immemorial? Simple questions. Who am I? Where did the universe come from? Where am I going? What is the purpose of my life? And most important, how can I be happy? And most importantly, what happens after death? Because if there is one thing certain in this very uncertain, chaotic world of ours, where we cannot even imagine or predict what is going to happen in the next minute, one thing we all can be sure of is that we are all going to die. And not just us. I know it's a morbid thing to say, but it's true. And not just us, but everyone and everything around us that we know and love from the moment of its birth is hurtling inevitably towards its death. So obviously these are the questions that have obsessed humanity from the beginning, and every religion in the world, every philosopher, all of them have tried to answer these questions. Which other branch has tried to answer these questions in a different way? Science. Science is on the same quest to answer these very same questions, but coming at it from a different angle. So, and these texts purport to give us answers to those questions. So let us do an experiment and let's see what the ancient Indian texts say about, say, where did the world come from? Where did the universe come from? Right? Every civilization, every religion, every culture has its own origin myths, origin stories, its creation myths. Anybody familiar with any creation myths? Okay, Brahma is the creator, all right. Any other creation myths? Not necessarily Hindu creation myths. Yeah. Vibrations. Okay. Or the Om. Okay. The Big Bang Theory, that's right. That's a creation. I'm not sure people will be amused if we call it a creation myth, but it's an origin story. Although even science is not sure that that's how it happened. It's just a theory. But I'm surprised nobody mentioned the biblical creation myth. Yeah, which is actually the most popular. When I travel around in India and talk to children in schools and I ask them about origin stories, they will tell me the Greek ones, they will tell me Egyptian ones, and they will tell me the biblical ones. But none of them will have any idea what the Vedic creation myths are. And to be very fair and to be very honest, hand on heart, I wasn't familiar with them either until I began to engage with the Vedas. So the creation myths that are presented, the creation myth that is presented in the Veda is in the oldest Veda of them all, the Rig Veda. But here's the plot twist. While every other culture and religion has one creation myth that you're expected to believe, the Rig Veda offers 4. It says, here's a creation myth. This is how we think it all happened. This is how we think it began. Don't like it? Not impressed? Here's another one. Try this for size. Do you like it any better? No? Okay. Here's a third one. Not happy? Try another one. This is a 4th. And if none of these impress you, you are entirely at liberty to go off and create or discover your own creation myth. Because the Vedas tell us, the Vedic sages said, this is what we think happened. There is no way we can be sure. Imagine that. What a gift across millennia to us to be able to say, to be given the liberty to say, maybe I don't know. Nothing is cast in stone. Nothing is written in stone. Everything changes, even the truth. They say there is nothing called the truth. There is your truth, and his truth, and her truth. And that is what the 4 creation myths presented tell us, that this is one person's view of it, this is another, this is another, this is another. We are not going to hazard saying that this is exactly what it was. And I'm going to take this opportunity to read out to you one of the creation myths from the Rig Veda. It's quite dramatic and visual, and I'd like you, if you want to close your eyes and imagine it as I read it out in suitably dramatic fashion. I will try. And then we can discuss what it says. So this is a hymn or a sukta called the Nasadiya Sukta, which means the hymn of that which is not non-existent. Don't worry about that. The Vedic sages were masters at this wordplay and double negation and things like that, so that you would take a while to wrap your head around it. But never mind the title. Then there was nothing that was non-existent, nor anything that was. No air, no light, no heaven, no space, no death, no life, no night, no day. Darkness hidden in darkness. Except for something that stirred in the still by its own will, and then was born of its own fire, its own desire, cleaving into above and below, giving and receiving, seed and womb. It swelled the universe where chaos was rife with power and life. And now, just listen up. Who really knows where it all came from, this creation? Who can declare that this is how it was done? Even the gods came later. And then the final nail in the coffin. Only he knows, he who fashioned it all, or does he? And that's the note it ends on, a passage, a creation myth from one of our oldest texts. And in that way, it not only validates doubt, it encourages it. It urges us not to accept received wisdom, not without questioning it. If God himself can be questioned, if his omniscience, his existence can be questioned, what other sacred cows can there be? There are none left. So the ancient texts encourage us to question, doubt everything. And in that sense, it is as contrary to a religion as can be expected. When religion is all about believing in the omniscience, the omnipresence, even the existence of God, Hinduism, or at least the Vedic religion, which now we call Hinduism, which started then, questions everything. And that is the wonder of it. What does that mean when you're given the liberty to create, to come up with your own creation myths? It means you're given the liberty to fashion your own universe. And it must be said that while there is a universe outside of us that we physically inhabit, the universe that we are most affected by is the one that we create in our heads. That is the universe we all inhabit all the time, and that is why everybody's universe is different. And Hinduism is all about customizing things. No one size fits all. A buffet of options, if you don't, whether it's gods, goddesses, food, whatever it is, rituals, traditions, there's a buffet always, and you pick what you want or create your own. Even the gods and goddesses. This is my favorite question to ask when I talk to children. Is Hinduism a polytheistic religion or a monotheistic religion? And then, of course, I have to explain what polytheistic is and monotheistic is. But if I asked you, as this audience today, the same question, would you say, how many of you would say Hinduism was polytheistic? Okay. Don't be shy. Yeah, polytheistic means many gods. Yeah. Yeah, I can't actually see you. Yeah, now I can see. Yeah. Okay, so not so many. How many of you would say Hinduism is monotheistic? Okay, and there are, can I change my mind? And there are a lot of you who haven't put up your hands at all, who are like, oh, okay, I shall just sit on the fence, which is perfectly valid, no problem. Yeah, so the right answer is that although it looks to all intents and purposes like a polytheistic religion, I mean, you just have to visit a South Indian temple and look at the Gopuram to see so many different gods and goddesses. We have, I mean, any Indian Hindu child can rattle off the names of at least 10, 12 gods and goddesses. But for all that, Hinduism is a monotheistic religion. We believe that all those different manifestations are just fractions of the whole, and even the sum of all of them does not add up even to a fraction of the whole. This is because the truth about God, which is described as a genderless, nameless, formless energy. So there is no gender, no name, and no form. And it's just a cosmic energy. And that kind of God, that kind of an idea of God is very difficult for human beings to absorb or understand. And human beings need some kind of a personal deity to be able to engage with, to be able to find solace and reassurance. And so, once again, liberty was given. Create your own gods, whatever you want. It is in other religions say God created man in his image. And here we say, you can create gods in your image, whatever gods you want. And it is, and there is a beautiful story I want to share about that. Somewhere in one of the texts, it says there are 33 crore gods and goddesses in the Hindu pantheon. And because it's very unlike a Hindu or an Indian to put a cap on the number of gods or to be so precise about anything, we thrive in vagueness. We leave always options open for new data to flow in and change. We are very much against saying this is how it was, as you can see from the Vedic text itself. So that is 330 million gods and goddesses. And I've always wondered who came up with this number. And I was quite convinced it must have been a British person at some point, researching, documenting, classifying the things the Western mind loves to do. He must have come up with this 330 million. And I was still puzzled, though, what 330 million? And once I met a Brit person that I was taking on a tour of the temples and talking about Hinduism to him. And he said, yes, I'm sure it was a Brit who came up with the number, and for a very good reason. And I said, what was the reason? He said, that was the population of India at that time. And that really explains what Hinduism is. One God for every single person. Customizable gods for everyone. While everybody is quite sure, understands very deeply that none of them are actually the real thing, but this is what I like to engage with. What about relationships? While in many other religions, God is a father figure, usually a father, a male, and usually a judgmental one, sort of like Santa Claus, sitting and watching you. Have you been naughty? Have you been nice? Where have punishments to be given? Where have rewards to be given? The Hindu God, because it's genderless, formless, and nameless, is none of those things. And therefore, once again, you are free to have whatever kind of relationship you want with your God. There are a few father gods, perhaps. I'm not sure how many are referred to as father gods. Shiva maybe, but he's a very absent father. He's always on his own trip somewhere in the Himalayas, so he's not. And I mean, the story we know about him is that he cut off his son's head. So not a very good father figure. He's just a cool guy. And there are many other gods, but you can have relationships like mother. Mother is very, very, very strong, the mother goddess. You can have relationships like your God can be your child, best exemplified by Krishna, because the kind of unconditional love that you give your child is the kind of love you share with your God. He can be your partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, any of those things, again exemplified by Krishna, and God can be your friend, best exemplified by Arjuna and Krishna in the Bhagavad-Gita and the Mahabharata. So all these are possible because no rules exist. And that is why Hindus have no problem going and lighting a candle in a church, or bowing down at the tomb of a Muslim saint, or going into a gurdwara and offering worship, because we realize that all these are just different names and manifestations, but the one God is the same. It's just an energy. And the Upanishads had a name for this energy. They called it Brahman. And it was always referred to as an energy. What does Brahman mean? The root sound of Brahman is Brah, which is also the root sound of Brihat, which just means vast, large. Something that is so large that it can hold space for everyone and everything in the universe within itself. That is the idea of God. And the Upanishads went one step further. As if questioning the existence of God and his omniscience was not enough, the Upanishads, which came later, went ahead and said something far more blasphemous. They said, when you ask the question, so we talked about where did the universe come from, another question that is answered and a lot in these texts are, who am I? And when the question came to the Upanishadic sages, who am I? They said simply, you are God. Not even you're in the image of God, not that you will get to God when you die, not even that you are different from God, but you're trying to be him. Nothing like that. You are God already in this moment. You don't need to go anywhere. You don't have to wait in time, space, nothing. You are God. And that is one of the Mahavakyas of the Upanishads. Aham Brahmasmi. You tell yourself, I am Brahman. But it's not enough to just say, I am Brahman. You have to live the sentiment of I am Brahman. And how? How do you live that sentiment? By making yourself so vast as to incorporate everybody else's ideas, every other point of view, with no disrespect. I don't mind what religion you profess, what the color of your skin is, what gods you worship, what food you eat, whatever different ideas you have, but it's only by listening to you and you and you and you that I might get a glimmering of the truth that is Brahman. And for that reason, I will make myself vaster and vaster and vaster to embrace you. Not make myself smaller and smaller and smaller and think of myself as a limited being. This is me. This is all me. This body is me. This mind is me. These thoughts are me. And you are the other. You are different. And I fear you and I don't know you and I hate you and that's why I will fight you. This is me. This is mine. They advise you, leave all that. Why would you imprison yourself in a little body and a little mind when you are in fact limitless, when you are in fact infinite? Instead, let this be your quest in this life, to make yourself larger and larger and larger, so you embrace everyone and everything in it. In the Gita, Krishna says, when you can see a bit of yourself in every single thing around you, and when you can see a bit of every single thing around you in yourself, then you have become Brahman. Imagine that if each of us could see a little bit of ourselves in everything around us, would we not hesitate before we thought a bad thought, before we said a wrong word, a hurtful word, before we did some hurtful action towards anybody or anything else? Because harming them would be exactly like harming ourselves. And that is the sentiment contained in Aham Brahmasmi. And it is scary, perhaps, to think of ourselves, and it involves a lot of work to get there, but imagine how empowering it is. I'm sure many of us have been to, often when we are on a trek up a hill, we've reached there, it is late in the night, we're lying down on our backs, there's no pollution, and we are staring up at this wondrous pudding bowl of the sky, studded with stars, seeing the Milky Way, and we tell ourselves, or our companions, man, I'm a nothing. I'm infinitesimal, I'm irrelevant, I'm powerless, and look at the airs we give ourselves. We are nothing in front of this cosmos. And most likely your companion would agree with you. The same thing may have happened to you when you're on a beach and looking out at the vast expanse of ocean, and you're telling yourself, oh my God, this cosmos is so big and so giant, and we are mere specks, we are nothing, we are insignificant. And once again, your companions may agree with you. But if an Upanishadic sage happened to be passing by and overheard you, he'd probably come over and give you a knock on the head for free. And he would tell you, how dare you think of yourself as a nothing, when in fact you contain the cosmos. And you would say, I contain the cosmos? How do you say that? And the ancient sages were nothing if not scientific, empirical. They examined things and came up with answers. And he would have told you perhaps that, so, tell me, what is the universe made of? And if you went by the ancient ways, you would say it was made up of the 5 elements, the Pancha Mahabhutas, the great elements that make up everything in the cosmos. And what are they? Water, air, fire, earth, and space, or ether. But we call it space, Akasha, which holds it all, which holds everything in it. And they would have said, what is a man made of? And you would have said, I don't know. Well, let's see, shall we? So what happens when a man dies? What is the first thing that happens? He stops breathing. Aha. So there was air in the man before, and the air has now gone out of him. So a man is made of air. What happens next? His body grows cold. Aha. So a man was made of fire. I mean, he had fire burning in him, and now he doesn't. It's extinguished. So a man is made of fire. What else happens? The liquids, the fluids stop flowing. No more digestive juices, no more saliva, no more blood flow. Everything comes to a standstill, congeals. So there was water flowing in him, and now there isn't. So a man is then made of water. What else happens? His body shrinks. It begins to shrink as all the spaces inside get compressed. His lungs, his stomach, his intestines, all his blood vessels, they all fall in upon themselves. They collapse. And there is no more space inside of him, so the body shrinks. Aha, so a man is made of space. And then if you leave the body for a little more time, maybe you cremate him, and then he turns into ash and returns to the earth. If you bury him, once again, the microbes get to work on him, and he returns to the earth. So a man is made of earth. And they say, do you not see the very same elements that make up the universe make you up? You contain the cosmos. You are as radiant as the sun. You are as vast and deep as the ocean. You are as mobile and powerful as air. You are as giving and generous as the earth. And you have the ability to hold all of humanity and everything else within yourself. How dare you say that you're insignificant, powerless, irrelevant? You are everything. You only have to reach for that power inside of yourself, and you will be strong. You will realize how much power you have. And there's no question of becoming anything. You already are. So the quest is only to go inwards and find it. Now, coming to the Gita itself, the most beloved text. I love telling this story always. It's my favorite. And we're talking about the opening scene of the Gita holds so many lessons for us. So what is the opening scene? There are these 2 armies arrayed, about to fight the battle of their lives. On one side are the 100 Kaurava brothers. They are the ruling kings. So they have managed to amass a much larger army of 11 Akshahinis or battalions. On the other side are their cousins, the virtuous, noble Pandavas, only 5 of them. And because they are not in power, they have managed to amass a smaller army. Many people on the Kaurava side would rather have fought for the Pandavas because they are much better loved, but they are under obligation to the king. They have to fight on that side. So only 7 Akshahinis on this side. And if you had been on a hill and were asked to call the result of the battle, take a gamble, most likely you would have said, obviously the Kauravas will win. Look at their army. Look at their numbers. In fact, the mightily outnumbered Pandavas won. And you would have guessed that if you knew that the field on which they were fighting which was called Kurukshetra, was also Dharma Kshetra, a field that always favored the good. So they had that huge advantage. Anyway, it's almost dawn. At sunup is when the war begins. The conches have begun to blow. In a few moments, the great war of the Mahabharata, which is the centerpiece of the Mahabharata, is about to begin. And then Arjuna the Pandava gets it into his head that he wants to be driven to the center of the battlefield. And he tells Krishna, who is his charioteer, Krishna, can you drive me to the center of the battlefield, please? And Krishna says, why? It's going to start in moments. Can we just please stay here? And he says, no, I want to lock eyes with everybody on the other side. I want them to know that their personal angel of doom is coming to get them, that they will be gone by sundown. Some psychological warfare is good, Krishna. Come on, take me to the center of the battlefield. So Krishna says, okay, if you so much want it, fine. Takes him to the center of the battlefield. Imagine that visual. 2 glittering armies, everybody bewildered, wondering what Arjuna and Krishna are doing in the center of the battlefield. There is Arjuna the Pandava, broad-shouldered, slim-hipped, golden in the sunrise, with his mighty bow, the Gandiva, clutched in his hands, looking at everybody on the other side. And then a most unprecedented thing happens. The greatest warrior in the world has a nervous breakdown. Right in front of everyone watching, the Gandiva slips from his hands are clammy, his knees begin to buckle, and he collapses to the floor of the chariot, turns to his friend Krishna and says, Krishna, I can't do this. And Krishna says, what? Just now you were like, oh my God, I'm going to lock eyes with them and kill everyone. What happened to you? And he says, I don't know what I was thinking, Krishna. Do you see who was on the other side? There's my grandfather, Bhishma, who has been more than a father to me since my own father died. There is my guru, Dronacharya, who taught me to pick up a bow in the first place. Everyone on the other side are my cousins. They're all my cousins. Maybe they're bad people, but they are my cousins. What about their sons, my nephews who have dandled on my knee? What about all those friends, the kings who are fighting on that side? What was I thinking? In which heaven is there a place for someone who has murdered his teacher, his grandfather? Surely this is an ignoble war. I do not want to fight this. Thank God I have come to my senses. Please take me away from the battlefield. And Krishna, who should have just said, yeah, thank God you've come to your senses and war is never a good idea in any situation, let's go, turned around and gave him the lecture of his life. And that lecture we call the Bhagavad-Gita. And he told him in 700 verses why it was so important to fight, not run away from his responsibility, to stand his ground, not use excuses, do his duty. Okay, it is no coincidence that this conversation happened on a chariot. Because if you went back to the Kathopanishad, the Upanishads, the Kathopanishad has a conversation between the god of death, Yama, and his young protege, Nachiketa, and they're talking about the chariot. And what Yama tells Nachiketa is that the chariot, the master, the self, rides in the chariot of the body. So the chariot is supposed to be our bodies. The 5 horses that pull the chariot are supposed to be our 5 senses. Always distracted by the world, always in pursuit of something selfish, always pulling in 5 different directions at once. Now, if you let those horses of your senses, if you let them free, if the reins are even a little slack, they will pull away in 5 different directions and your chariot will be wrecked. That's the end. What is needed? You need reins to be able to hold the senses back. And which are the reins? What are the reins? The reins are our lower mind, manas. But just loose reins are no use. You need a capable charioteer to hold those reins, to apply just the amount of pressure that will allow them not to run away, but will also not hold them back too much so that it becomes uncomfortable. And who is the charioteer? The charioteer is our higher intellect, our discrimination, which, if trained, will be able to hold on to the reins of the mind, which will pull back the horses of the senses and prevent them from going away in 5 different directions and lead our chariot on the path that it should be led. In the Mahabharata, when Krishna and Arjuna are in the center of the battlefield, it's the same thing. Krishna, the charioteer, is Arjuna's discrimination, his higher mind. And he is able, the conversation that Krishna and Arjuna have is really a metaphor for what we should be having with ourselves, our confused lower self with our higher self, that is Krishna. And this is why, even though the Bhagavad-Gita was delivered in a faraway field in India thousands of years ago, and in which one friend was telling the other friend why he should stand up and kill his family, it is still relevant to us today. Why? Hopefully, none of us will ever be in a situation where we are asked to stand up and kill our families. But it's relevant because Kurukshetra is not just a faraway field in Haryana. Kurukshetra is the world. Kurukshetra is in our hearts. Kurukshetra is in our minds. And every day we go out to do battle. Moral dilemmas. Fighting with ourselves. Is this the right thing to do, or is this the right thing to do? What is right? What is easy? What is convenient? What is harder but more right? These are the conversations that we are having. All the Pandavas live inside us, so do all the Kauravas. They are not outside of us. And there are always 100 Kauravas and 11 Akshahinis, and only 5 Pandavas, and there are 7 Akshahinis. So whenever we are on the horns of a dilemma, what do I do? The Kauravas are always louder, guiding us towards paths we should not take. And the Pandavas are registering their resistance, but it's very weak, and we don't hear them. And the Pandavas' resistance also comes from various conditioning of our own minds. And therefore, we should do what Arjuna did. Because the purpose of our lives is not, never mind what the Declaration of Independence says, it's not the pursuit of happiness. Because happiness is a transient thing. It comes and goes. There is no point putting so much energy chasing happiness, chasing something that is so transient. So we'd rather chase something that is long-lasting, eternal, that actually helps us lead a better life. And what is the point of what is the purpose of our lives according to the ancient Indian texts? It is to be fearless, to live fearlessly. When we can be free of our fears, when we can have freedom from our fears, then we can be absolutely free. And that is what we call mukti, moksha. That is the purpose of human life, not happiness. To live so fearlessly that we can be free. And Arjuna epitomizes that by his body language. When he collapses to the floor of the chariot, imagine this, he's the greatest warrior in the world. He's trained not to show his emotions. Imagine if we were in his position, that these people are watching, these people are watching. If I show with my body language that I'm in despair, the Kauravas will already begin to celebrate, thinking that he's now going to leave, their morale will increase. The Pandavas, on the other hand, their morale will fall, my people will feel betrayed, everybody's going to be worried, and just because of that psychological problem, they may not be able to win the war. If I stay here and win and think about that later, generations will praise me, songs will be sung about me, and I would have won the war. If I go away, people will probably spit on my memory, and I will be a traitor. And if we were in such a position, most of us would have said, you know what, just get this over with. It's too late. Just finish it. We will think about it later. And while it looks to us as if Arjuna collapsing to the floor of the chariot is a picture of fear, abject fear, it is actually the greatest picture of fearlessness. To be able to shut out the Pandavas, shut out the Kauravas, not worry for one instant what other people think of you. That is fearlessness. That is courage. And that's what we should be able to do. Shut out our Pandavas, shut out our Kauravas inside, because only then will we hear the still small voice of our Krishna, who is only our own higher self, who always has our back, who knows what is good for us. If we only encourage him to speak, if we make the effort to get to know him day after day after day, just like Arjuna did. Arjuna and Krishna were best friends forever. They had spent years getting to know each other and in each other's company. And that is why Arjuna trusted him so much that he was able to put his dilemma in Krishna's hands and say, you tell me what to do, Krishna, I will do it. And we can develop that kind of relationship with our own Krishna by not only doing action, mindful action, but also then introspecting on the action and finding out what sits well with us. Just because something sits well with everybody else, it may not sit well with us. Be fearless and customize your own response to every situation. There is no standard response. There is no one-size-fits-all. That's the only way to mukti, freedom. Thank you very much.